My name is Sandra Metts. I'm a professor in the School of Communication, and the courses I teach, obviously, Emotion Seminar, a class on human communication and aging, and interpersonal communication. There's something called emotion, and that's a very specific element, and it is defined as a relatively brief state of arousal that is valenced, positive, negative. And it is not enduring. Depression can go on for months, sadly. And shyness may be a personality trait that people will have for their whole life. Right now, I'm a little nervous because I'm being interviewed. I don't have any emotion right now. I'm not afraid. I'm not angry. It's just anxiety. So, again, emotion is one small unit within this much broader umbrella of affect. It has taken a while for us to figure this out, but we do know that there are 5 basic emotions. Some people call them innate because infants are born with them, and almost every animal on the planet is born with them. And that is fear, anger, sadness, disgust, and happiness. And as you can tell, there's 4 negative emotions. Gee, only 1 positive. But that positive emotion is so important because when you feel happiness, you have resilience, so things can kind of slide off of you. But those basic emotions supposedly are innate or hardwired into our brain. And there's a little place in the back of the brain, and the back of the brain developed first, speaking of evolution, and then it moved forward until we got our much more sophisticated and advanced frontal lobes. But way back there, there's something called the amygdala, and that's the Greek word for almond, because it is almond-shaped and about the size of an almond. And through our modern technology, we're able to see what part of the brain is activated when you play a scary movie for your sample, or you play a sad movie. You can see which part of it is, imaging, brain scan imaging. Yeah, it's very cool. And we now know that at least for sadness and anger and fear, there's a location back there. And what's wonderful about happiness is it's not located in one spot. It activates the entire back of the brain, which is why, even though they had not even known this when they wrote Broaden and Build theory, now we understand why it makes you more creative and more resourceful, because it's using more of the brain. Some of the social or blended emotions, secondary emotions that we have are shame, guilt, embarrassment. And if we didn't have those, think about how we would organize our social groups. If I don't feel guilt, and we call them sociopaths, then I cannot follow the rules that we have established to get along together in our community. If I can't feel embarrassment when I spill my coffee, then obviously I don't know proper comportment with my, Goffman would say, my props from the dramaturgical perspective. So I realized that the basic emotions helped us survive. But as soon as we began to form groups and communities, all of these complicated social emotions arose. And we have slowly refined them over eons of time, but I'm not sure we fully understand them. When we have this arousal, the first thing we think about is good or bad. I mean, the body just alerts itself. Okay. Well, psychologists said, something else goes on after that, doesn't it? Appraisal theory was born. And there are 3 phases of appraisal. There's that primary appraisal where you go, I'm aroused, what am I feeling? It's just that initial, oh, I'm frightened, or no, oh, this is okay. That's my friend who just touched me. It's okay. Okay, so primary appraisal just kind of protects us a little bit. But then there's secondary appraisal where we say, oh, come on, now you're not really angry. Think this through. Okay, yeah, right. And in that stage, you think of other ways of coping. So, yes, it's the case that sometimes when we're angry, we would just like to lash out with our hands or our feet or something. But instead, we think, oh, just say, it's okay, you didn't mean to say it that way. Okay. But there's also reappraisal, which occurs later. And that is in a conversation with a friend, or else we're reflecting at home as we drive or something like that. And we say, now, why did I get so upset today? Oh, I know why. It's because blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So we literally do rethink the episode, and it's called reappraisal. So what we find, the emotion area is huge, and because it draws on psychology, sociology, communication, all of that, we understand that emotion, and you're going to ask a question about primary and secondary, emotions are both innate and automatic, but they're also socially constructed. So that's where appraisal theory comes in, because I do have to evaluate cognitively what I am feeling, because each society has constructed a matrix, whatever you want to call it, of emotion experience. And so in my culture, given my background, I draw on whatever I know about what should happen in this context, and I decide that I was not really hurt, or I decide that I'm feeling envy, not anger. You get something I wanted and I'm angry. Actually, no, I'm not angry, I'm envious. So I'm going to work harder. So that's how appraisal theory got in there, and it's very useful, because other than a few primary emotions, which I'll list in just a moment, you can't understand your emotions unless you go through the appraisal process. I do believe, especially when we're texting or sending emails or using any kind of social media, the emotion is still there. But when we express an emotion face to face, it is so much easier for someone else to interpret that emotion, because even if there's not a standard facial expression for a particular emotion, you can see the gleam in my eye if I'm being sarcastic, you can see the subtle smile, you can see my forward lean, you can see my looking up to the other side, all of that, you can tell that in context. And I just did some interesting research with emotion in the workplace when it's sent in emails. And the bottom line was, never express emotion to your boss. Because we think if we put a little emoticon in there when we have been sarcastic, that will set everything right. Well, it doesn't necessarily, because again, going back to appraisal theory, so much of what I understand from what you just said, and I don't have your cues to look at. All I have is what you've put on that screen. And I read that, and I read that, and I read that. And if I'm your boss and I'm thinking, how come you think you have the right to speak that way to me? Well, but I didn't speak any way to you. I was just making a little joke. I didn't take it as a joke. But I put a smiley face. Oh, great. So we need to be extremely careful, because the medium itself doesn't allow us to see all the cues that we take in from people when we're talking face to face. And we're not even aware of it. Right now you're looking at me and you're nodding and you're smiling. So I know that what I am saying is being taken positively. So I continue. But if this was on an email, I would have to wait another hour, 2 hours, a half a day to get your response before I could respond. 15,000 things happened to me in that interim there, and then I have to respond again. So I think the lack of visual cues makes it extremely difficult to interpret emotion when it's subtle in email or text. I was thinking about some of the stories that have been on the news lately, and although we would like to think that newscasters are absolutely objective, they're human. And I'm not sure they can present without some of their own emotional responses. And the same with when you talk about cases that then go to trial for something, and do we then influence decisions about that? I don't think the population does, but that's why they keep juries sequestered, I think, personally, is so that they will not be influenced by what they see on the media. And there's just blossoming research now on the appeal of certain movie stars or television stars and how the general public responds to them depending on how they express emotion. And there's tons of research now on whether the coverage of certain stories brings a bias out in people who respond emotionally as viewers to how it is covered and all of that. But it is an enormous area that's just now taking off. We haven't done a lot with that because we were always studying people and face to face, but there's a lot of that out there now.